Oh! Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Cars and Toys. In this episode we'll be replacing a starter on a 97 Maxima. But if you have a different kind of vehicle, it's pretty much the same process. Usually you have a couple bolts holding the starter to the block and a couple of electrical connections, and that's it. It's a pretty simple job. Let's get to it. Okay, now on the Maxima, the starter is found right below the airbox on the driver's side. In this case, it's actually, we're kind of lucky, because on other cars you have to jack up the car and get underneath it to remove the starter. On this car, it's really not that bad. It's pretty easy. But that being said, if you're changing the starter on your vehicle and it's not a Maxima, just look up the owner's manual. You can find it online, pretty much for any car. If you can usually buy an electronic manual for a couple bucks online, and then you can find exactly where your starter is. But that being said, let's go ahead. We have to get all these things out of the way here on the Maxima. So let's go ahead and start with that. Okay, first step is we need to disconnect the negative terminal on the battery. You have these 4 clips around the air filter box. Just go ahead, and you have the last one right here. Just go ahead, unclip it, disconnect your mass airflow sensor. You have a little connector here. Just go ahead, remove this. You also have 2 clamps you need to remove right here. Once you remove those 2 hoses right down here, just back this off a couple of times, and then we can remove the whole assembly out of the way. So once the airbox is out of the way here, you have this plastic tubing which comes up to the front. What you need to do is remove these 2 tabs, and also you have these sensors. Just press down the tab, and there you go. But before you remove this, you really have to take out this airbox, and these are 10mm bolts. Okay, and once you wrap that up, just go ahead, remove this airbox. Just make sure you don't get it snagged on any wires. Alright. And then again, we need to remove this plastic housing, and before we do that, you have these clips up here, really. Really don't worry if you damage these. You can get replacement clips at the auto parts store. Even oh, there goes one. Even Lowe's and Home Depot carry these. You can get a bunch of them really cheap. I have a bunch of them actually here. Remove it like so. And then once you have these clips removed, you have a sensor right here. Just make sure this is a 10mm. And like I said earlier, on some other cars you really don't have to go through all this. On the
For example, on a small block Chevy, it's you just jack up the car, take off the electrical connections, and that's it. And this cart's a little bit more involved, but at least you don't have to get underneath it, and that's a big plus when it's winter out. Okay. This is where your starter is. So what we need to do is remove this connector right here. This is a 13 millimeter. And be careful, you don't want to lose this nut. Usually with the new starter they give you one, but just in case, don't lose it. And you have a washer that slips right off, like so. And then you also have a, let me zoom out here. You also have a connection. If you follow the wire coming from the starter, you have this connection right here. So you also have to undo this before you remove the starter from the block. Alright, this is what I was mentioning earlier. You want to verify that the starter is receiving enough power, or in other words, enough voltage to turn over. To do that, get yourself a voltmeter, take the negative terminal lead, touch it to the negative terminal on the battery, take your positive lead. Now again, this connector here, this guy right here, there we go, this was on this terminal right here. So I just unbolted it, took it off that terminal. Now what you want to do is just touch it with the positive lead. And as you can see right there, we have 12.5, 12.6 worth of volts. That's perfect. That's what you want to see. So in other words, now we verify that the starter is getting enough power. Indeed, it is getting power to turn over. If you don't have a reading on your voltmeter after you do this, then you either have a bad ground, maybe you have a bad fuse, or even a bad relay. So you want to make sure that this is indeed your problem, because you don't want to go out, get your starter, come back, do all this work, and it's all for nothing. So again, you want to verify that it is getting enough power. Once you verify that, go ahead and you can move on to the next step, which is removing the starter from the block. Alright, so now we have two bolts holding the starter on. This is where the first one is located. It's tough to see, that's why I have the socket kind of trying to point it out. But at the end of this socket, you have your first nut. This is a 14 millimeter. Once you remove this guy, you have a second nut. Let me see if I can maybe turn on a light here so you guys can see. There we go. Right there. Not the easiest thing to get on camera, but right there, that is your 17 millimeter. That is your second nut. So that's a 17 millimeter, and this guy right here is a 14 millimeter. So you need to remove both of these guys. All right, I'm going to start with the larger one, the 17 millimeter. Again, let me turn on a light here, a little bit better. But anyway, so as you can see, there isn't a lot of room here to remove this nut. And one thing that you could do, let me first change this lever. Okay, one thing you can do is get yourself a socket. And what you want to do is fit the socket over the end of the ratchet. That way it gives you some extra leverage. So stick that, this is, by the way, this is a 3/8 drive ratchet, and the socket is a 9/16, so it fits almost perfectly over. Now look at this handle I have, a lot more leverage just to get this bolt loose. And then just yank it away, and that's it. We just got it loose. Alright, so that first bolt is loose. Now we have the second one. Again, I'm using the fulcrum or the lever here just to cheat, and just, there you go. It just makes the job a lot easier to do this. Otherwise, you'll kill your back and your arms trying to get this off. This is the 14 millimeter. I'm just loosening up right now. And there she comes. Okay, so we have the 14 millimeter nut removed. And now we have the one more, which is the 17 millimeter. And again, it's a little tight under here, but in fact, actually, once you loosen it up a couple of turns, you can just loosen the nut with your fingers. Pretty big. There you go. That's your 17 millimeter. And just take your time. And there you go. That's it. Once you have your new starter, just go ahead and reinstall it. There we go. And that's it. Once you've threaded in a couple times, get your ratchet and tighten it down. And then we'll go ahead and tighten down this 17 millimeter. Once you have both the 14 and the 17 millimeter relatively tight, go ahead, get your little extension here and tighten it down. Alright, once the starter is nice and snug, we have to reinstall our connection here. So go ahead, place the terminal over the stud there. Then you have your washer and your 10 millimeter nut. Okay, so once you wrap that up, go ahead and you have your electrical connector. Just go ahead and reinstall that like so, and then we have to put all of the plastic back on the car. So let's go ahead and reinstall the sensor here. And again, this is a 10 millimeter. Okay. And then we need to place some new clips. And again, I picked these up at Lowe's. Just go ahead and reinstall the clips. There you go. And as we look to the side here, you have your sensor. Go ahead, reinstall your sensor. Make sure it's on there. Now we have the airbox. Just make sure you don't snag on any wires here. And you want to try to get the bottom here flush against the box. Okay, so once you've clipped everything back together, don't forget to reinstall your mass airflow sensor, and now we need to reconnect the battery. Okay, moment of truth, go ahead. And that's it, we're in good shape. Okay, so that's all that's involved. As you can see, not really a big deal. Just take your time and you'll be successful. Any questions, concerns, just leave them below, and we'll see you next time.